One of the most effective ways to make your bike faster is to upgrade the suspension. So let's do that and make the 390 Duke faster. Stock suspension is okay. I've ridden it for years, but as your rider skills develop, you will start to push the suspension harder and harder. This Duke is fitted with White Power suspension. White Power is a KTM sister company. Over the last couple of years, KTM has upgraded to the White Power Apex suspension, which has adjustability that the base suspension does not have. Recently, they fitted this to the RC, and the spy shots of the new 2024 390 Duke show that it also is running the Apex suspension. So it's a good upgrade to go from the base level to at least the Apex. If you are running race days or similar like that, or you've got a very high skill level with the bike, you might consider upgrading to the Apex Pro suspension, which has a lot more sophistication to it. There are alternatives. You can buy fork inserts from Andriani, and I think there's a couple of others, but I'm sticking with White Power. And what I've done is I've taken some White Power suspension units from a recent Husqvarna Svartpilen 401, which has the full level of Apex suspension fitted to it. It's a simple enough job, and it definitely improves the ride. So let's see how it's done. I'm going to swap out just the front today because we have to do a slight modification to the rear. And I've shown before how to get these units out. I've got a video on rebuilding these particular ones. So the process is the same. We remove the mudguard, unbolt the brake, take the wheel out, drop the forks out, put the new forks back in, and reverse the process. I'm not going to go into any detail. I'm going to link my fork rebuild video, which shows this process in much more detail if you need it. This is what I'm going to be fitting. It's the Apex suspension, and you can recognize Apex because it has this red plastic ring on it here. Otherwise, visually, very much the same, except that these have adjustable clickers on them. One fork leg for rebound, one for compression, and that means you can adjust the forks to suit you and your riding. It goes from soft to sport, and you can choose what works for you. Mudguard is held on by 3 bolts each side, 2 here, 1 here. So I'm going to remove these. Pressing these rear arms. And the front mudguard is removed. Next we remove the speed sensor. You may well have zip ties holding it on, in which case cut them, but remember to replace them. I've only got the one because I find this stays in perfectly well. It's worthwhile just cracking loose all of the bolts we're going to remove before you put the bike up in the air. Remember the spacers. Now you can see this has come loose. I'm just going to tuck it up into the brake line so it doesn't get damaged. It helps to push your brake pads back in a little bit just by wiggling it backwards and forwards. That way when you come to put it back on, you won't have an issue. Appreciate you probably won't have stump pegs. don't lose the wheel spacers. Now we can remove the fork legs. You've got 3 bolts, 2 clamps to loosen off. It's worthwhile just keeping one of these done up. Take a look at the top of the fork leg to see how much fork leg is sticking out of the top of the clamp, and when you put the new leg in, make it the same. It's very worthwhile holding on to this fork leg as you do this, because when it comes loose it will drop out, or it can drop out. So I've undone 3 of the bolts, so let's just undo the last one, and there it goes. Now carefully take it out, trying not to do too much damage to the anodizing on this, and then we simply put the new apex leg in. If you bought this from a Husqvarna like I did, then you'll have to remove the reflectors. I would have removed them anyway, because it interferes with this clamp here that holds the brake flange in. So line that up with where you want it. Also make sure to put these stickers where you want them, because once you've clamped it up, they will be where they are. The bottoms of the fork legs can move, that's not a problem, but make sure you get this lined up nicely and neatly on the end. Lightly clamp that, make sure I'm happy that it's in the right place. Just going to move it a little bit more. Just lightly clamped up at the moment. They will need to be torqued. Just go over them and check they're hand tight. Make sure those bolts are fully in. We don't want this fork leg dropping out when we put the weight of the wheel on it. And the other fork leg is exactly the same. And with the fork legs in place, we can simply rebuild the bike. So line them up as you want them to be. Try not to knock the spacers out when you put them back together. Refit your pinch bolts on the other side of the wheel, but do not tighten them. The wheel's not going to fall out because I've put a little bit of tightening on that bolt, but we do need this fork leg to be able to move side to side before we tighten it up and get into its final position. Now we can recover our brake, unhook our ABS. I'm just going to slip the zip wire on there. with the bike back together but not fully torqued up yet, what we can do is just to reset the axle to make sure the fork legs, the fork bottoms are correctly aligned and there's no binding in the fork tubes. We just put the front brake on and operate the front suspension a little bit. With that done, we can now tighten up these bolts on the bottom of the fork leg and torque everything down. Obviously you've got two nuts this side. Appreciate you can't see them at the moment in camera. You've got the nut here, you've got the bolts for the brakes, you've got these two, this one and the same on the other side. Torque specs are all in the description. .5 Newton meters. These are 15. That's actually very little. To 30. Most people would put Loctite on those as they do hold the brake on. 12 Newton meters, 15 Newton meters. That's really pretty much hand tight. With the fork legs installed, all we need to do now is to set them up. There are two things I would suggest. The first is that we take these red rings and we push them to the top of the stanchion. This will mean you'll get some judgment of how much fork travel you are using. So let's talk about the settings themselves. We have two different settings here. We have the compression and we have rebound. The way these work is that the further clockwise you wind it, the stiffer the settings get. And the way to set them is to turn them all the way clockwise until you reach the last setting. And then there are three standard settings. There's comfort, standard and sport. Full payload is the same as standard, and you set them by turning backwards, so anti-clockwise. So eight settings is sport, 15 settings is standard, and 20 clicks is comfort, and it's the same on both sides. So mine are actually set to around the sport mode, which is what works for me. So you can choose your own settings and work out what works best for you and your riding style. And that's it. That's how easy it is to upgrade the front suspension on your Small Duke to the WP Apex system. If you're going to go for Apex Pro, then what you would do is you would replace the internals with the Apex Pro 6500 system, but that means taking this out, putting a new cartridge in, refilling with the correct amount of oil. And the same would be if you went for an external third party like Andriani, or there's one or two others who make similar inserts. If you want your suspension set up perfectly for you, go find a suspension specialist, and they are out there who will be able to set your bike up perfectly for you and your riding style. Next time we are going to upgrade the rear shock absorber to the Apex from the standard system. It's pretty simple to do, but it does require one small modification. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.